All right, thanks for coming, everybody. My name's Mika Korchinski, owner, founder, brewer at Strangebird in Rochester. Also a New York State Brewers Association board member. And yeah, thanks for coming to this talk. Data is knowledge and knowledge is power. For years, the vibe of the craft brewer has been to wing it, making decisions on the fly based on gut feelings, dogma, or routine. In a more mature marketplace, we need to do better. Make decisions based on real data and document for history. A brewer's job in this competitive environment is driving consistency and quality while improving efficiency. I believe every decision should be made within this framework. Not to worry, can help. Spencer Grimm is the founder of Grimm Analytics, a service combining software analytics and consulting to support QC and operations efficiency at craft breweries. Spencer is passionate about helping data-driven brewers interact with the science of their brewing, and his mission is to make analytics programs practical at breweries of every size. When he's not crunching numbers or sampling local beers with friends, Spencer enjoys woodworking, yoga, and shooting too many threes in pickup basketball games. It's really weird.
It counts for two in pickup.
Three counts for more than two. And the tournament is going on right now, and I've never been this disconnected from the college basketball tournament. And it's kind of weird, but in the same time, I am no more happier than when I'm under a roof with all of these brewers. So thank you. Without any further ado, Spencer Grimm.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming. I'm really passionate about analytics, and I hope I can give you guys some easy take-home points, show you the landscape of analytics for craft brewers, and show you the charts that are useful, as well as some of the just take-home strategies that have improved efficiencies at all the breweries that I've worked with over the last 5 years. So let's get started. As Mika said, I'm the founder of Grimm Analytics, and all I do is work with craft breweries on record keeping and analyzing their data. So it's a mix of software, analytics, and then consulting to bring the data around to insights and efficiency. And I think that the industry has had a hard time making analytics possible for breweries under the 20,000 or 30,000 barrel mark. The software that is out there is great at compiling your inventory and helping you on the distribution side, sometimes the sales side. Those parts of brewery software, they have been usable in all the other industries, and so the software landscape was able to cover us. But when you get down into the nitty-gritty of brewing, it can be difficult to get all of the notes that people need and then analyze those notes. And so I think the analytical landscape is kind of new. I've got a Slido, if you capture that with your phone. And I'm just trying to get a grasp on where people are at with their analytics programs. So the question is, let's get going on this computer. Has everyone got it? Let's get me in here. So the question is just, what is the state of production analytics at your brewery? And so far we're seeing that most breweries are recording into paper logs, and they can take those paper logs and review them. Maybe the head brewer, after every batch, can give it a quick look. And then about a third of breweries are looking at analytics through their brewery software. And I'm very curious what people have thought about their experience of analytics through the existing software, whether they feel like whether it's sufficient. Does anyone have any takes on that? How like if you use, so what do you use?
We use Ovier.
Nice.
Although we probably don't use it to its full capability. Finding specific reports is really difficult. The kind of analytical reports are kind of easy to download, but I just have to make sheets to interpret the data specifically for that format. Which is kind of time consuming, because it's not like it, I can adjust the format of the report to give me what I want. There's just like a lot of data information.
Definitely. And when I see the software landscape, there are things that are really basic like brewhouse efficiency. You know, like in analytics, hopefully we're breaking down brewhouse efficiency into starch conversion and the mash efficiency and lautering the total, the whirlpool loss. And you want to break it down into components. But for most folks, they can't even calculate their basic brewhouse efficiency. So things are tough. And then we do have 27% of brewers here that have their own record keeping and analytics systems. And so I'm also going to be talking to you today to just give you some pointers on how to build out your own system in a way that's going to be effective and most time effective, most of all. So to begin with, I think it's important to know what your goal is as you're learning about brewery analytics. Are you a brewer who wants to know the charts that are out there and how they can be used and be able to ask someone to make those charts for you, or ask it of your software provider? Or are you really looking to learn how to build your own system from scratch and record all the notes you need? Then I'm going to go over kind of the 4 types of brewery analytics, which each have a different data source and perhaps a different expertise if you want to make use of them. So you've got distribution sales, where you're interested in the performance of your sales team and in incentives. You've got account management, where in distribution you might want to communicate the brands that are performing well to different accounts, or keep them regular with purchasing. And if most of your product is being sold through distribution, then distribution sales are going to help a lot with production forecasting. And of course, in distribution, you really need, you have tight margins. And so thinking about your cost of goods, pricing, profitability becomes very important. Next, there's taproom sales. And taproom sales are usually coming from your point of sale system. And so you're generally going to get some easy charts that are kind of built for businesses of all types to see what products are selling, but it's hard to dive down into like brewery-specific data. But you're looking at your bartender performance and how your events are doing, the composition of bills, how long people stay at your brewery, whether they add on merch, that type of thing. And you're trying to increase sale volume because you know it's going to be profitable in your own tap room, and it's all about driving volume. And about getting return on taproom investments, which could even be opening satellite tap rooms and the like. And you can spend money to make money in tap rooms. A third section would be utilities. You're getting your utility data from your utility bills, and it really comes down to your chiller, your boiler, your HLT, your use of hot water. You're thinking about factory uptime, and there are interesting pieces of software that are coming out in this space where every single solenoid can have a device on it, and those devices see all your valves opening and closing in the brewery, and they can track all of that factory uptime data, look at your chiller, your boiler, all of your durations on the hot side, they can just capture that and process it through AI. So it's kind of an upcoming field. But what I'm going to be talking about is production analytics. And so I'm talking about the performance of your brewing team, cellaring, packaging, recipe and SOP design, comprehensive record keeping, and the profitability, quality, volume, etc. So when you're starting a production analytics program, there are really 4 outcomes that I get excited about delivering to a brewery. The first is culture. When you can give objective staff feedback and say that, for example, let's say Lucy is a new brewer, and she's shown here in green. She started back in 2023. And on first look, this is a mass performance chart, and you see that her green dots are lower than the purple and the blue dots, and it might be disappointing. You could criticize this performance, but when you have cross-batch data, and you can really see things long-term, you can get to support people with objective feedback. This is actually real data that I was working on for a brewery, and the messaging here was, look how fast you're improving. The improving brewer started as the lowest, but every single month there were improvements until they were performing at the level of everyone else. And so that narrative of improvement is really helpful for brewers to buy in and be interested in having attention to detail. And then there's enabling data-driven research and open-mindedness to R&D. So one of the things that I've seen brewers, especially ambitious brewers, struggle with at breweries is that management doesn't really trust that their R&D ambitions are going to actually yield results, and they just want things to stay the same. And if people are changing recipes too much, it's just going to cause chaos. In this example, Susan is interested in trying bioglucanase on the mash, and the manager, Rambo, he needs analytics and structure before being comfortable with R&D. So it's a perfectly reasonable position. Like, every brewery has experienced too much chaos in recipe development. But if you have a chart like this, and you're looking at your mash performance, you can very clearly see when SOP change occurred, and with each dot as it develops, you're seeing that SOP change is actually working. There's a 2.5% increase in the mash efficiency from using bioglucanase here. And it just puts management in a mood to encourage all of those ambitious brewers to stay at their craft and think in an engaged way. Next, there's resolving conflict through data. So it is a little bit silly that in these little process details of brewing, there can be conflict, but I assume that many of you have experienced it. If there's a process detail that people just can't agree on, and it stretches out over months, in this example, one person wanting to use doesn't think that rice holes are necessary and finds the process of adding them to be annoying. And Geoff was a guy who is really interested in his rice hole process, and he feeds the birds throughout the whole mash, and he believes that it's important. That rice hole difference in process might only be a 2% difference, and that 2% is within the range of variability between brews. So if you don't have it wrapped, it can be really difficult to really see which philosophy is correct, and those kinds of conflicts can extend over months. But if you have data, then you can solve them relatively quickly and objectively. And then it's just the gamified brewing experience. When brewers have good scores that they're trying to achieve while they're brewing or packaging, etc., then they gain attention to detail. They go after those scores, and it becomes something fun that they look forward. They look forward to a new conquest every week in some part of the process. And so, along the way to gamification, I'm going to talk about performance scores, and this is really about taking. It is about taking every measurement we have and creating a great standard that we can compare it against. So, for example, what you might compare it against the recipe's target value that's good for like a pH. We achieved 5.4 pH, but the goal was 5.3. So therefore, we can say that we had a 0.1 or plus 0.1 performance on mash pH. And the reason why you want to turn all of your raw measurements into these plus or minus performance scores is that it's going to make every single batch of beer comparable. And so now you can look at mash pH across all of your brands on a single chart, and you can see that across the board, we're adding too much acid, we're not adding enough. And I'll also show you later how performance scores can be really easy in quickly seeing a dashboard and picking out which people, which initials have a fault in their process or are particularly good at something, or which brands are on target versus not. The other way to get a performance score is to just take the average of the last 5 to 10 batches. So for mash efficiency, for example, you can look at the average of the last 5 to 10 batches of that brand, see that it's 80%, and now you can turn your 82% result into a 2% performance score for the mash, or maybe you were 5% under that 80% standard, and therefore you can compare your mash efficiency across all of your brands. And the third way to get a performance score is to actually have a derived equation. And so here, this graph is mash efficiency on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, we're looking at how many quarts were lathered into the kettle divided by the pounds of grain that were used. And so it's basically just showing that these are stronger beers where they're not well lathered, and these are your 12, 11, 10 Plato lagers, etc. that per pound of grain, you're lathering a lot of liquid into the kettle. And so just by making this graph of mash efficiency against the quarts lathered, you can get a trend line of how your brewery tends to perform. And in Google Sheets, etc., you can get the equation of this trend line and use that as your prediction for mash efficiency. So you can be developing a recipe, and based upon the recipe details, you get a predicted mash efficiency, and you can therefore get mash performance from that. And so at the bottom of all my recipe spreadsheets, I'll have something like this, where for all of these important metrics, the mash efficiency, bright yields, package yields, it's just listing out the last 10 brews, and at the top, it gives the average of the last 10, or maybe you can also choose to look at it by style, and that 89% mash efficiency, the average of these last 10, becomes a good standard to judge all mash efficiencies for that brand against. The next thing we're looking for from production analytics is sustainability. And go ahead and show you this chart for the carbon footprint of brewing. And what we'll see is that For a can of beer, for example, 2/3 of the carbon footprint of that can of beer is going to be the can itself. And so a lot of the carbon footprint of brewing is in our packaging materials. And so this is brewing with 50% canned products. And we see that malt sourcing is 10% of the footprint. If we were able to improve mash efficiency by 10%, we get a 1% reduction in our carbon footprint. Kind of similarly, boiling is 8%, and it could be 18% depending upon your boil lengths. So all of your malts might be similar in its weight to just boiling your beer. And similarly, chilling is 16%. And so what you see is that if you want to make an impact, you can put together, boil length reductions, chilling optimizations, which are really like, if your set point is really low on the bright tank and like your glycol is not that cold, your pump is just going to constantly run. And I've seen examples where people are spending like $10,000 extra on their chilling just because they have a set point at 32 or 36 where the pump wouldn't be constantly on. It kind of happens at microbreweries most often. And boil length reductions are a very interesting topic. People want to avoid DMS. You'll get DMS if you're not able to boil it all off, but with modern malts, they contain less DMS precursor, and a lot of breweries are finding that they can cut boil lengths to 60 minutes from 90 or even to 45 minutes and not experience any negative effect. And that's going to be the easiest way to have sustainability impact. And so this is visualization of like in a 10,000 barrel craft brewery. They might use 1,000 metric tons of CO2, and there are like each person, the average American uses 16 metric tons in a year. So a 10,000 barrel brewery might use 60 person equivalents of carbon footprint. So even if, if you were able to convert 1,000 can barrels to kegs, you would be able to get rid of 6 person equivalents. If it's your lifetime, if it's one of your personal goals to cover your carbon footprint, then if you're able to sell in a tap room or at on draft accounts, that's going to give you a big effect. But even these, 1 or 2% effects from boiling, cold maturation, and optimizing ingredient usage, they're going to take whole person equivalents away from this brewery. So, we work in manufacturing and we're in a position to make a big impact. The third thing is just beer quality. So if we set up great analytical systems, we're able to make sure that things like ABV, pH, DO, and timeline remain regular. So for example, you can have these charts where you see that the recipe's target attenuation is about 72%, and with this brand, they've been regularly above it. And I know in this case is a situation with uncontrolled hop creep. But attenuation can also be really interesting to graph against your match durations or your match times, and just a great example of one of the QC parameters you can control. It's similar with bright tanks. If you could actually have these measurements charted, you can really begin to pick out trends in your centrifuge health, or you can make sure your tank purging is going well, and in general, if you're actually presenting graphs like this to your staff, they're going to have more attention to detail, and they're going to be driven to have improved results. And so it's great to have in the brewery culture to have these types of graphs. TPOs over time. You know, I think it's possible at a brewery to go from 100 ppb TPO down into the 50s and below, and sometimes it happens just accidentally. But if you actually have the graphs, you have this opportunity to celebrate the operator who was able to drive it down. And of course, the operator is going to have this gamified experience of seeing how well they're performing and how much they're impacting the brewery. So, talking about discovering SOP variability between crew. These graphs are from an interactive dashboard. So later on, I'll show you how just a simple Google Sheet can be pulled into an interactive dashboard and give you this experience where you're able to just click on brand 1 and see the attenuation graphs for brand 1, click on brand 2 and see the attenuation graphs there. For pH, we're able to look at this by brand and say, brand 1 and 2 have been on target with match pH, but brand 3 obviously has a problem. There's been too much acid, and brand 4, we're not using enough. And by having charts like this, by initial and by brand or by style, available on a dashboard, you gain this ability to just really quickly scan your brewery and pick out the problems. And the interactive element of these dashboards is that you then click on brand 3 and you'll see the history over time of things like how many milliliters of lactic acid you've added, or whether there's been a malt change at some point that created a drastic change in the mash pH. And it can be similar with mash temperatures. You can find that certain brands or certain brewers have more variability than others, and it creates an opportunity to see brewer 4 and brewer 7, and maybe they should have a chat with brewers 1, 2, 5, and 3 about how the way that they measure mash temperature or the way that they are bringing in might be impacting their mash results. And it just helps you to discover that the deeper reasons behind why your beers may vary from batch to batch. It could just be that a different brewer has a slightly different SOP that we've never realized, and we're able to pick it out from this graph and start a conversation, and once you get on the same page. Now, the other thing is that inefficient brewing is variable brewing. When your measurements of any kind are inefficient, it can be very difficult to have it also be consistent. It's really difficult to have a core lauder that is exactly 5% less efficient every time. It tends to be variable. And so when I look at times of inefficiency, you often see this kind of trend where the results are bunched up, and then as they become inefficient, they widen. And of course, you just want to solve the efficiency problem, but also all these batches have different yields. The regular yeast pitch they're adding to them might not be correct. If they're varying by 10%, let's say, then your hop rates are all out of whack, your salts, every addition you make. And so creating efficiency is also just going to reduce the variability of the brew. And then another big thing for quality, and will also be for what's coming up next, profitability, is healthy fermentations. And here's some charts I love to look at for fermentations. So this graph comes from the team reporting stable gravities when they occurred. This could also be, you can also use a Google formula to figure out when the minimum gravity was in your cellar measurements, and say that is the day of the minimum gravity is when it's stable. And if you're charting it over time, you can see there's a whole lot of variability here between 4-day fermentations, 9-day fermentations, 12-day fermentations, and of course, these fermentation profiles are going to be very different. It's going to wreak havoc upon the production schedule, and the beer is going to taste different. It's going to have a different yeast profile. Similarly, a way that I like to make fermentations comparable, this has a whole lot of guidance on it, but instead of having raw gravities, you can chart as the progress towards terminal gravity for each batch. And so 100% is their original gravity, 0% is their terminal gravity. And now, even if you use a different branch or styles, you can see their fermentations lined up in the same way. And you can come in here and not only look at when fermentation stabilized, but the fact that on day 2, there's between 25% of the fermentation remaining and 70% of the fermentation, or even 80% remaining. You can see day by day there's a whole lot of variability. And so this is actually a chart from a brewery quite a while ago, and now the same brand, the last 7 batches, looks like this, where all the fermentations are very tight, and they've just dialed in their yeast pitching, they've dialed in their yields to tanks, so that they're pitching the same amount of wort, and now they've tested these consistent fermentations. And then when you aren't tracking all of these parameters, you're of course going to have issues like an unconverted mash that leads to starches remaining in the wort. You get a starch haze, or you get tannins from a problematic slaughter, or diacetyl from fermentations being all over the place. Maybe you have very different timelines for each batch of a brand, and so sometimes it's getting 2 days on the hops, and at other times it's getting 8 days on the hops, and you're creating off flavors from your fruit management. But the place to really start with analytics is to make it profitable at your brewery. These programs are only going to survive and thrive if you can quickly produce profit and have it support the brewery overall. And so what I've seen on average is that there is a lot of upside in mash efficiency, for example. You could often get 10 to 15% reduction in your COGS. And to launch into this mash efficiency conversation, I want to briefly touch on calculating grass efficiency. So it is interesting that it has been a bit rare for brewers to be able to calculate brewing efficiency. It isn't so hard. You're generally using the fine grind as is. You're multiplying that by the pound of that malt in your grist. And then you are using times 11.5, which is the constant for converting it to a Plato realm. And that will give you just potential extract points. You sometimes have to convert fine grind dry basis that will be in your COAs, your malt COAs, to a fine grind as is. you can run into problems if you're not actually using the recipe amount of grain pounds. Sometimes you need calculations to be based upon what was actually used in the brew log. And then you want to add extract points from your sugar. So you can find online what the extract value of various sugars are. It can change between maltodextrin and lactose, etc. I'm not going into too much detail here to give an exact calculation. But you get this potential extract, you get a real extract from your knockout gallons times your knockout Play-Dohs, and then it's just your real extract divided by potential extracts, you get brew house efficiency. But we're really going to get somewhere if we start breaking down brew house efficiency into multiple steps and isolating problems within the process. Just run out of time here. So let's go over some of the most impactful changes that lead to these 10 to 15% reductions in ingredient usage. So the first is in the mash, as soon as you provide real-time feedback, you're going to see the power of gamification or the power of just observing your crew. People take things more seriously if you are just presenting this data. And so right away from that, you get more efficiency just by targeting these things. But the big thing for brew house efficiency is the mill. I'll show you guys next how to find the right mill settings for you. But it can be a 5% increase commonly at breweries from down in the mill. And mass efficiency also snowballs. So if you have 5% higher efficiency, you're able to use fewer pounds of malt, and then as a result, you might get 2% more efficiency in the recipe, and so you get the snowballing effect. Bioglucanase, it is an enzyme that removes beta-glucans from your grist, and beta-glucans are sticky, they make laundering more difficult. There might be some value to those beta-glucans. It's always difficult putting an additive into your beer, and it's a very personal decision for every brewery. But I've used beta-glucanase with a whole lot of very discerning, like traditional brewers who are very technical, and they take a critical eye to it, and they can't find a change in their beer. But on the efficiency side, we always see like a 3% boost, and it isn't that it changes the peak extract that you can get from a grist, because you can get a great lager without bioglucanase, it's possible, but it will reduce your variability. It gets rid of all of those poor lagers, makes laugering experience just easier, and overall I would see these kind of 3% increases in bioglucanase. People can love it. And then, the mash temperature and duration. With modern malts, it's rare that your temperature and your duration aren't sufficient to convert your starch, but it is possible for recipes that are kind of on the edge of standard parameters. So you take a look at that. Mixing specialty malts with base malts during milling can have a big effect. So you have pockets where there's no diastolic power, no enzymatic power. And then there is not creating hot and cold pockets within the mash itself by making sure the grist is well homogenized. And that can come down to programs like seeing how long it takes for your grist to grain into the mash tun, and you time that out. You divide it by your pounds, and you can figure out, hey, I'm graining in at 25 pounds per minute, or you get a rate, and you can associate that with a gallons per minute that you're going to grain with, and use calculations like that to make sure that your grist is well homogenized. It's still good to have an eye test when you're mixing your grain, but having standards like that can really help your crew get things on target. So we're going to get into conversion, starch conversion, and the place where, like, within mass efficiency, you want to separate starch conversion from lautering. The measurement that you're really going to care about is your first runnings gravity. Your first runnings gravity, it isn't really impacted by like how well your lauter is going to go. It's just a measurement of the raw extract you got. And so the important thing is that you take an accurate measurement. It can be difficult for people to figure out the timing at which they're going to, you can see that at the beginning there might be some more foundation water in that lauter, and so that the technical first runnings can actually be lower. But as you go on the 30-40 minute mark, often right before you're starting your sparge, around that time, you have a plateau, and if you can manage to have a clear SFP around when you take these first runnings gravities, you can take measurements that are in that plateau between these two stars, and you get accurate first runnings gravities. And you can correlate those first runnings gravities to your mill gap. So here we say you have 0.05, 55, 60, 65, and we see that until this brewery gets to 0.055, they're getting lower first runnings, and you can therefore say that their starch conversion is lower. You can also use sieve test results, and sieve test results, they're based on standard, and they're extremely useful, but I often do see that following the standard sieve test may not suit an individual brewery. It may not be where their mass efficiency is highest, or where their starch conversion, their first runnings gravity is highest. And so it can be really useful to have these sieve measurements and correlate them to the peak in your first runnings gravity. And then you have a more developed idea of what your brewery standard should be for your sieve tests compared to the industry standards. So here we're saying that when 35% is in that course of sieve number 14, we're getting a peak in first runnings gravity. And of course, if your mill is finer, producing more, if you're, this is the graph to see with this. If your first runnings are the same at 0.05 and 0.055, you're not going to get any more starch conversion out of a finer grind of your grain, but your lautering is going to begin getting more difficult. And so you're really just looking at the widest gap where you can get high first runnings gravity. And because I love these performance scores, the way that I deal with first runnings gravities and make them comparable over brands and styles, and also over recipe changes. And if you change your mash thickness, your first runnings is going to be different. So you can say strongly against that. You can convert it to starch conversion. And this is an analytical technique where we're taking the potential extract of your grist and the mash infusion gallons. So you're, like all these extract points in a body of water, what is the highest gravity, the ideal gravity that you get? Maybe you say, that's 22 Plato. Like 100% extract into this liquid volume would give you 22 Plato. You can then take your actual first runnings, this would be 21 Plato, divided by the 22, and you get like a 96% starch conversion. And it can just be nice to see starch conversion in percentage terms. You can see, you can have alarm bells go off if you're down at 85%, for example. And it also becomes very useful for separating mill and mash problems from lautering problems. So in this graph, we have starch conversion on the x-axis and mash efficiency on the y. And we see that as starch conversion is going up, or as starch conversion goes up, so does mash efficiency. And the correlation between them tells you how important these first running gravities are to your efficiency and what its main cause. Whereas if starch conversion is not correlated to mash efficiency, then you're typically looking at a lautering issue. So you can use these kinds of analytics to pinpoint the problem in your process. I think we're 47. So I'm going to end the talk there. And are there any questions that folks have about data analytics? Johnny?
Yeah, I have a question. Like, I'm seeing a lot of mash efficiency, which is obviously huge, but I'm curious also if there's also a way to correlate, and I'm going back to the one slide you had about the rice hulls or not.
Yeah.
Is there a way to also measure time as well? Because you could, in that specific case, you could also look at time. Okay, we use rice hulls, this is how much time it's going to get through, the water. Because the rice hulls, this is how much time it took without the rice hulls. Definitely that make a difference. Is that something you can also measure?
Yeah. And it just requires that in your brew logs, this is one of the reasons why brew software can be difficult. Maybe there isn't a native place to record that auto duration. But if you're recording that auto duration, then of course you can. Like in the systems that I use with my breweries, there's 700 different metrics that are raw data, and for the performance scores, you just get, you can get to a place where there's just a massive amount of data, and you can hopefully explore it quickly and interactively through these interactive dashboards, but there's so many little details you can look into, and the work never really ends. Every process point has 10 ways to look at it.
Just kind of answer it, but I fell in the category we built our own software kind of database towards like collecting the data, right? So we have trouble with that now, where different brewers prefer to do it one way or another. Just want to know like best practices you see with that to collect that data.
Yeah, I'm a little bit mistimed, and I really want to. I should show you some of this canning yields and packaging yields where the profit really is, where you can make a whole lot of cash. But let's get to some comments about that. So, for example, this is my record-keeping interface, and this is just a spreadsheet where you're duplicating the sheet, you're getting a second template. It's a very common DIY system. Is it kind of what you've got going on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I kind of created logs for the spreadsheets that kind of made it easier for them to enter. But yeah, common as just one each paper. So then I ended up doing it myself afterwards, which is super good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I found with people who prefer paper is that if you make it robust with calculations, if there are standards for every measurement, and in real time, that mass efficiency, starch conversion, et cetera, is being calculated for them, then they get excited about digital logs. And it's also about building in production calculations that they find useful for their dilutions, or to help them calculate acid additions, et cetera, that the digital platform becomes very useful. So, you try to get people collecting data digitally, but then you've got this, you've recorded data and maybe you're saying, from cell C1, where the beer name is, I'm going to draw that from every single beer, and you're building this database out from your interface that will look kind of like this. And the real worry I run into with these custom setups is, especially if you base things upon cell locations in a spreadsheet, you change your interface, you want to add another line on risk bounds, and then every data location becomes out of sync. And especially if you want to build something out with 700 metrics, and you add a row, you screw up 400, and you're going to spend a few days doing something really tedious in the database. It really breaks down these programs. It can be a reason to get help from someone who can code, or you just want to build it right the first time and keep on adding your changes to the bottom of the sheet. It becomes a real limitation. Also, you have to offload your individual templates to a secondary sheet that maybe has the database so that it doesn't become laggy. That's also something that code can just automatically handle for you. But with Google Sheets, if you ever want to talk after this presentation, I can show you how easy it is to get things onto these interactive dashboards from services like Google Spreadsheets, or Power BI is the dashboard equivalent for Excel. And if you get some programming skills in there, the kind of workflows it automates are uploading batches into a database. You can track, an experienced programmer can track the locations of all data so you can just drag things around in your interface and it stays aligned so you never have that out of sync problem again. And there's a whole lot more batch prep and task management that you can do, where you can end up with nice task management profiles where you see all the batches in your tanks and their status, what day they're on. Kind of more advanced task management recipe design setups are possible even in a Google Sheet if you just have some JavaScript controlling the sheet. Any other questions? Thank you all so much, and please come and chat with me if you're interested about this subject. I appreciate that you came, and I'm always excited to help.